Tokyo just re-elected the current governor, which means she defeated 55 other candidates. And while the overall result may just point towards a third term, this election result will change the future of Japan's political landscape. So in this video, we'll review the results, the top 3 candidate strategies, and who actually won and lost in this election. And you might be surprised to hear that the losers weren't directly involved in this election. But before we dive into each candidate, let's take a look into the 2024 results after briefly reviewing the previous gubernatorial election. Here are the results of the 2020 gubernatorial election. As you can see, Koike won roughly 60% of the overall votes against Kenji Utsunomiya, Taro Yamamoto, and Taisuke Ono. Even when we combine all the main opposition candidates, their overall votes doesn't reach Koike's 60%. The voter turnout was at 55%, which is lower than the previous 2016 election, which had a voter turnout of 59.73%. Now, here are the results of the 2024 gubernatorial election. The current governor won with 42.77% of the votes, Shinji Ishimaru got 24.3% of the votes, and Renho got 18.81% of the votes. Toshio Tamogami got 3.92% of the votes, so he didn't stand a chance. There are 4 takeaways from just looking at these numbers. Number 1. Koike lost 700,000 votes compared to the previous election. Number 2. Ishimaru won 1.658 million votes, placing him in second place. This completely threw off mainstream media as it depicted a Koike vs Renho match, a LDP vs CDP match for the 2024 gubernatorial election. I'll come back to this point later in this video. Number 3. When combining the opposition candidates, Koike would have lost the election. The majority of the voters prefer a different governor. Number 4. The voter turnout increased to 60.62%. The last time an election surpassed 60% was in 2012. Before 2012, the last time an election surpassed 60% was in 1975. Some analysts, including Shinji Ishimaru, believe this is a result of Ishimaru's use of social media such as YouTube, TikTok, and X. While the top 3 candidates were technically running as independents, both Koike and Renho had organized support from political parties. The following numbers are exit polls that the Tokyo Shimbun gathered, so the specific numbers may vary based on news agency. However, the overall trend seems to be true among media investigation. For example, roughly 70% of citizens that identify themselves as LDP supporters voted for Koike. Roughly 80% of Komeito supporters voted for Koike. Critics call this the Soshikihyo or organized vote, which critics believe gave Koike an upper hand. In a similar manner, roughly 70% of CDP and JCP voters voted for Renho. The LDP didn't openly support Koike because of the ongoing fundraising money scandal, but they quietly supported her by helping her out with flyers and simply gathering votes. As for the other 2 main parties, the JIP and the DPP, roughly 40% of each party's supporters voted for Ishimaru, and roughly 30% of each party's supporters voted for Koike. What's interesting is the non-party affiliated voters. 38% of the non-party affiliated voters voted for Ishimaru, and 30.6% voted for the current governor. Other media outlets may give Koike a bit more and Ishimaru a bit less, but overall, there's a general consensus that Ishimaru was the most popular candidate among non-party affiliated voters. With that said, Ishimaru still lost, so let's take a look into how Koike was able to win a 3rd consecutive term. During the 2-week campaign period, Koike didn't have a lot of opportunities to deliver speeches. For those who are unaware, it's common practice for Japanese politicians to hop on their vans, stop at train stations, get on top of their vans, and deliver a speech. She explained that she would prioritize her work as governor, which resulted in Koike delivering just a handful of speeches after work or on the weekend. However, this isn't what resulted in her victory. There are 2 reasons for her victory. The first reason is the staunch support from the LDP and Komeito. As already explained, almost all of the LDP and Komeito supporters voted for Koike. The second reason is her platform directed towards women and children. Starting 2024, public and private high school education in Tokyo became free. It's a bit more complicated, so check out this video to learn the details. Tokyo Prefecture's version is very similar to Osaka Prefecture's design. Anyway, Koike also passed the Zero Ichihachi support, which will provide families with 5,000 yen a child per month from the ages 0 to 18. I believe her emphasis on education and childcare garners support. For example, according to the NHK, 40% of women Tokyo residents voted for Koike. Let's use another exit poll. The Asahi Shimbun conducted an exit poll on policies that voters were most concerned about. 31% of the respondents mentioned the economy and employment. 30% mentioned education and child support, and 15% mentioned medical care and social welfare. Regarding these three categories, Koike received the most votes among respondents who mentioned education and childcare support and medical care and social welfare as concerns. She also received a lot of votes from respondents who mentioned the economy and employment, which suggests that voters support her work during COVID. An overwhelming support from the two ruling parties in attracting roughly 30% of non-party affiliated voters helped Koike receive nearly 3 million votes for the 2024 gubernatorial election. Shinji Ishimaru came in second place with 1,658,000 votes. This threw off many political analysts and mainstream media, but as a spectator that mainly follows the news online, I can say that this felt like a normal result. It was clear that Ishimaru made every effort to collaborate with big online personalities, including streamers, to get his message across. As mentioned in a previous video, Ishimaru had a strong social media team and allowed anyone to make shorts and reels of his speeches. This encouraged many to upload on social media platforms and allowed Ishimaru to reach a younger audience. Let's take a look at the following table that shows what age group voted for which candidates. This data is provided by the news outline managed by Fuji Television. As you can see, Ishimaru won 42% of young adults and 37% of voters in their 30s respectively. He still has a larger support group compared to Renho when it comes to voters in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. In addition to his social media presence, he took the extra mile to outshine all of his opponents. He delivered a total of 228 speeches within 2 weeks. That's more than 10 speeches per day. Unlike Koike and Renho, Ishimaru is an outsider and probably unknown among the older generation. Therefore, the fact that he got more votes than Renho is significant. Ishimaru believes that he could have gained more votes if only mainstream media took him more seriously, but more on that later. Although media portrayed this gubernatorial election to be a LDP versus CDP competition, Renho got third place. This also threw off many political analysts and mainstream media. Renho's campaign followed the traditional method of 2 to 3 street speeches per day, with famous politicians delivering speeches with her as well. When it comes to Renho's defeat, the Japanese Trade Union Confederation criticized the CDP that they lost votes because of the coalition with the Japanese Communist Party, or the JCP. The leader of the DPP also criticized the CDP for their partnership with the JCP. This places the CDP in a critical point because the DPP is willing to work with the CDP to take down the LDP. The Japanese Trade Union Confederation is willing to support the DPP and the CDP in the coming election, but partnership with the JCP could jeopardize any potential collaboration among opposition parties. Now, when we analyze the winners and losers of this election, it's quite clear that Koike won this election because she secured a third term. I don't think she'll run for a fourth term, as I'm guessing she still aspires to become Prime Minister. This might mean she'll return to the LDP in the future, or she might just retire and try to become an influential force. However, the greatest victor of this election is Shinji Ishimaru. His performance will change the political landscape going forth, and this makes me extremely excited because we might see a different result in the next lower election, which is currently scheduled for October 2025. First of all, Ishimaru's second place clarified the power of social media. Given that Ishimaru's main support is among the younger population, this means that as this population grows older, he may still have a strong, consistent support base going forth. Ishimaru also exposed the limits of mainstream media. At the beginning of the election, mainstream media didn't report on Ishimaru at all, regardless of his untraditional 10 speeches per day strategy. Media was too busy with a women versus women narrative, and this crafted narrative not only irritated Ishimaru, but also most of his supporters. After the election, mainstream media rushed to Ishimaru, asking him about his thoughts on his defeat. During the press conference right after the results were announced, the NHK was the first media outlet to interview Ishimaru. When they asked Ishimaru why he believes he lost, he smirked and responded by saying it was because of mainstream media like you guys. The crowd lost their mind. The entire press conference with different mainstream media outlets were similar. They asked questions regarding his overall policy goals, all of which Ishimaru already clarified in his initial press conference back in June. Interviewers also asked about whether he was happy for being in second place or whether this election was a stepping stone for something larger. Because he already clarified his main policy goals, he responded strongly against interviewers who asked basic questions or tried to put words into his mouth. In response to being happy and the stepping stone question, Ishimaru retaliated that he gave it his all and that this has nothing to do with how he feels, but the results merely reflect the will of the people. If Ishimaru truly grabbed the hearts of the voters, less people would be watching television to gather information, thus inadvertently weakening the main political party's appeal as most parties suck at their online presence game. Anyway, this divided spectators into two camps. A lot of people wrote on X criticizing Ishimaru for being too aggressive, while others supported Ishimaru for not succumbing to mainstream media. Celebrities were also part of this discussion. As a spectator myself, I tend to lean towards the latter because the interviewers and their questions were very basic and not enlightening at all. Unfortunately, these interviewers from different media outlets ask similar questions. Good interviewers should be able to quickly scrap their pre-made questions and adapt to the situation. Second, Ishimaru's performance significantly pressures all existing political parties. Ishimaru ran a completely political party-free campaign and he gathered 1,658,000 votes. When asked about the future, he stated that all options were on the table, whether that be running for the lower house election in Hiroshima 1st District, which is the current Prime Minister's district, or creating a new political party. If he creates a new political party, this could really challenge all existing political parties. He not only won the most non-party affiliated votes, but also took a bite out of voters that affiliated themselves with certain parties. 20% of the LDP voters, 10% of Komeito, JCP, and CTP voters, and 40% of JIP and DPP voters voted for Ishimaru. This shows that the greatest losers of this election is not Renho per se, but all political parties, including the LDP. It was reported that the JIP tried to support Ishimaru, but Ishimaru declined their offer. If the CDP ditches the JCP due to Renho's defeat, this puts pressure on the JCP. Small political parties like the DPP, Sanseito, and Reiwa will have to fight against a potential Ishimaru party. Renho's defeat suggests that the CDP's recent victories are not based on the CDP's appeal to the general masses, but based on the LDP's lack of appeal. Because people have no viable alternatives, those lost LDP votes are streaming into the CDP. If this is the case, I wouldn't be surprised if all those lost LDP votes end up in Ishimaru's hands. However, if creating a new political party is Ishimaru's plan, he has two major roadblocks. Number one, he will need to create a solid team that shares the same vision. Politicians that will not dabble in favoritism, cronyism, and succumb to bribes. In other words, he'll need to find people who wants to drain the swamp. In order to create a successful party, he'll need experts, but a lot of experienced political experts may want to exploit the system. Additionally, if he wants to win an election, he'll need to get the majority of seats, meaning that he needs to find at least 233 candidates. That's a lot of money and a lot of work that needs to be done in 1 year. He can always work his way up slowly, but he would risk losing all the hype around his recent rise. The second roadblock is his character. Ishimaru is very divisive, and as already mentioned, people either like him or hate him. I think we all recognize how a politician's demeanor plays a big role in voting. For example, the current Prime Minister is extremely unpopular in Japan. According to the Mainichi Shimbun, Kishida's current approval rate is at 17%. In order to improve their image among voters, the ruling party can vote in a new leader in the upcoming LDP inter-party presidential election. This election occurs every 3 years. The next prime minister is usually pre-decided by groups of politicians called factions, but Kishida technically disbanded these earlier this year, so check out the left video to learn more about the LDP's factions, or the right video on why Kishida disbanded all LDP factions.